Okay, at the moment we have got a file which we're writing words to or reading words from, so it's one way of saving persistent data. Another way of saving persistent data is by using a database and SQL, and we can use that in Python. So here's my take on this as far as your learning and the exam is required. This is like playing a game. As you get better, so you increase and go up levels. And we have been doing that. So we've been going from the very basic levels to some harder levels. So we're on around about level 6 or 7 with our understanding and writing, and the top level is 9. And what we're about to do now, okay, there's going to be some questions in the exam on SQL, but they're going to be fairly straightforward, not as difficult as this. This is going to be level 9. So what I mean by that is, if you had read the project and done the project properly, I probably would have expected to see something like this in the project. So you would have gone away, you would have studied what SQL was, you would have learned how to use it, and you would have applied it. I would have taught you how to use it. And this is where we are now. I'm just teaching you how to use it. But this really is level 9. Now, that doesn't mean that people from level 1s to 8 can't learn from this. Lovely. That people can't learn from this. They certainly can. And the more you see, the better you're going to be, and the further up the levels you're going to be. So I'm going to make no apologies for this. However, the amount of learning that I expect you to do during this part of the course is limited. I would expect you to try to understand what's going on and be able to copy and make my programs work, but I wouldn't expect you to think of them yourself. However, if you were doing this, like I said, as a project, then certainly I would be looking for this in the very, very top levels of projects. So with that said, let's move on to what we're doing. We're going to have a high score table. So when somebody scores in the game, they get 20 points. We're going to save that value of 20 points along with that person's name. And that's going to be persistent. So that means you can play it today, turn on your computer tomorrow, play it again, and the values from the previous day are still there. So whoever scores in the high table is there. We're also going to limit when we print the high score table off to just the top 5 scorers. Now, I'm doing this because if you go back to the project document, you will see that this was one of the requirements. Now, I have to say there's more than one way of doing this. And the way not using SQL is to use either a bubble sort, a merge sort, or an insert sort to be able to arrange the people in order of how much they scored. However, I know from experience that the amount of coding that you would have to do for that is probably as much as we've done already. It's quite lengthy. It's also fraught with difficulty because we would be using a record. In other words, let me just show you. Let's start a new file. Where are we? Python, file, new file. Because we would be having a record stored as an array with a name. I'm just going to write name and a score. And the problem with that is that the score, well, firstly, the problem is that we've got a record with 2 items in our array. At the moment, we've only been able to save 1 thing in a file. Saving 2 things separated by a comma is quite a tricky task. Not only that, to be able to arrange it in order, we have to convert this number 20, which is a string, into an integer, and then be able to order it on this value here. And I know from experience that that is a really lengthy task. So If you want to see it, I'm happy to program it, but you'll have to ask me. For now, I'm just going to use SQL because it is so much simpler. I'm going to go through it kind of slowly so you can pick it up. I don't want to lose you at every stage, but there is the chance that that might happen. So I'm going to start off with this new file. Now there is a library, and we looked at libraries with our own programs, and we can see that here. We imported WriteFile. WriteFile was a file that we created. Here it is, WriteFile. So we used that file in this program here. And we're going to do the same thing. There's already been a file created with lots of programming code that I will not be going into, called SQLite 3, version 3. So that already exists as part of Python, and it's really, really useful. And we're going to be making use of that in this program. And when we copy it into our main program, we need to copy the import statement as well. So there's a couple of things that we're going to be doing. The first thing is we haven't got a database. We're going to have to create a database. And normally I call it initialization, or init for short. So if I do init database, a function, that's what we'll do. What that does is looks in the file system to see if a database exists. If it does, it opens it and uses it. If the database doesn't exist, it creates one. And it creates one with tables and fields and field names, but we won't get too far into that, and it won't be too difficult to understand what's going on. So that's one thing that we're going to do, is initialize the database. And let me see, I need to put something in here, otherwise it won't indent properly. So temp delete shortly, because I want to write the functions that we'll be doing. Let's just do a equals 6. Right, that's perfect. These two lines are going to be deleted in a minute, but I need to write what we call my function stubs. So there's a couple of things we're going to be doing. We're going to save the high score, or save a score. So let's call it high score. Save high score. So I have another function which just saves the high score. And again, I'm just going to copy these two lines for the time being, just to have something in here so that it won't crash. I need another one. So we've started up the database, we're saving a high score. What I really need to do is have another function that opens up the database and gets the high scores. So I need another function called show high scores. And let me just paste those in there as well, so it doesn't crash. And that is it as far as I'm concerned. I'm just going to need 3 functions. One to set the database up, one to save our values into the database, and one to read the values that are in the database and print them onto the screen. So in the next video, we will start filling these functions out, starting with this one, init database. And I'm also going to talk about something called an alias, which will change how we use this value here. So that will start in the next video. Oh, before we go anywhere else, this is untitled, we need to save it. So if I choose File, Save, I'm going to call it dbase.py for database. dbase.py. There we go. So we're ready in the next video to start filling these out. I might do a video for each just to slow things down so that you can take it in.